The ballroom was glowing with golden light, filled with the sound of laughter, music, and clinking glasses. People in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos mingled under the crystal chandeliers, their voices a mix of polite compliments and quiet gossip. It was the annual charity gala hosted by one of the richest women in the city, Miranda Hawthorne. Her events were known for their luxury and the way she loved to mix generosity with a hint of competition. To her, life was a game of showing who could shine the brightest. In one corner of the ballroom stood a man who clearly didn't belong to this world of diamonds and champagne. His suit was clean but old, his shoes slightly worn, and his eyes carried the tiredness of someone who had seen too much in too little time. His name was Daniel, a single father who had once worked as an engineer until the company he gave his years to shut down without warning. Since then, life had been a constant struggle, one where every day was about keeping the lights on and making sure his little girl never went to bed hungry. He hadn't come to this event as a guest. He had been invited out of gratitude. Years ago, before her death, Daniel's wife had been a pianist who used to play at Miranda's mansion during her private gatherings. She was talented, gentle, and always smiling, the kind of woman who made music feel alive. Miranda had liked her performances but never truly noticed the woman behind the piano. Still, when Daniel received a letter thanking him for his late wife's contribution to the Art Foundation, he thought attending the gala might be a way to say thank you in person. But now, standing there among people dressed in luxury worth more than his yearly rent, he began to regret coming. He tried to stay near the back, quietly sipping water instead of wine, watching as everyone laughed and chatted about vacations, business deals, and new cars. They barely noticed him. He was invisible, just another face who didn't fit the picture. When Miranda entered the room, the crowd turned toward her. She was elegant, confident, and used to the attention. Her diamond earrings sparkled under the chandelier as she greeted guests one by one. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were sharp, always observing, always judging. She loved to test people, to see how far they'd go when pride was on the line. As the evening went on, Miranda took the microphone to thank everyone for their generous donations. Her voice was smooth, her tone charming. She announced how much money they had raised for the arts, making sure to mention the large donations from the wealthiest guests. Applause filled the room, but it was the kind of applause people gave when they knew others were watching. It wasn't for the cause, it was for the show. When the applause faded, Miranda looked around the room and noticed Daniel standing quietly near the piano. He looked uncomfortable, slightly out of place, holding a small envelope in his hand, the thank you note he had written for her. For a moment, she tilted her head, studying him. Something about his presence stirred curiosity and a hint of amusement. She recognized him vaguely. "Ah, yes," she said with a small smile. "You must be the husband of our late pianist. What brings you here tonight?" Daniel nodded politely, trying to keep his voice steady. "I wanted to thank you for supporting the orphanage my daughter attends. It means a lot." His words were simple, honest, and full of quiet gratitude. Miranda smiled, but there was a playful edge to her tone. "How sweet. And tell me, did your wife ever teach you how to play?" The room chuckled softly. Daniel shifted awkwardly. "A little," he said, "just enough to understand how much she loved music." That answer seemed to amuse Miranda even more. She turned to the guests and said in a teasing voice, "Then perhaps we should let him show us what he remembers. After all, this is a celebration of art, isn't it?" Laughter spread around the room. Daniel's stomach tightened. He hadn't touched a piano in years, not since his wife passed away. The thought of sitting at one in front of these strangers, people who saw him as a charity case, made him want to disappear. He shook his head politely. "I don't think that's a good idea, ma'am." But Miranda wasn't done. "Oh, come now," she said, her tone light but her smile sharp. "I'll make it worth your while. Play Chopin for us, on my inheritance, every penny yours if you can move me." The room erupted in laughter again. The guests loved her dramatic flair, loved watching her toy with others. They assumed she was joking, that the man in the worn suit would never dare take up the challenge. But Daniel didn't laugh. He stood there silently, his hand gripping the edge of the piano, his heart pounding. The phrase echoed in his head, "Every penny yours if you can move me." He didn't care about proving anything to her, but the thought of what that money could do for his daughter made his heart ache. Lily had a medical condition that needed treatment soon, and the bills were more than he could manage. If this was real, if she truly meant it, maybe it was worth trying. Miranda leaned back in her chair, clearly entertained. "What's wrong?" she teased. "Afraid of a little piano?" The crowd chuckled again. Daniel's eyes lifted, meeting hers. There was no anger in his expression, only quiet resolve. "You said Chopin?" he asked. Her smile widened. "Yes, play something that can move me. If I feel nothing, you get nothing." He nodded slowly, then looked down at the grand piano beside him. Its black surface gleamed like still water, reflecting the golden light of the chandeliers. His reflection looked strange, tired, older than he remembered, but beneath the fatigue was something steady, something that had been sleeping inside him for years. He sat down on the piano bench, his hands hovering above the keys. The room went silent. Even Miranda's teasing expression softened slightly, curious to see what he would do. For a moment, Daniel didn't move. His fingers trembled slightly as he remembered the nights he used to sit beside his wife while she played. He could still hear her laughter, see her patient smile as she guided his clumsy hands across the keys. She used to say, "Music is just emotion and sound. If your heart speaks, the piano listens." He closed his eyes. He could almost smell her perfume, feel her warmth beside him. Then softly his fingers pressed the first keys. The sound that came out was fragile at first, almost hesitant, but it carried a tenderness that caught everyone off guard. The crowd leaned in. The melody was simple, just a few notes of Chopin's Nocturne. It wasn't perfect, he missed a note here and there, but the feeling in his playing was raw and real. The music wasn't about showing skill. It was about sharing something personal, something broken and beautiful at the same time. Miranda's laughter faded. Her expression changed as she watched him. She had expected a clumsy attempt, something to laugh about later. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a strange tug in her chest, a warmth spreading through the silence. As Daniel continued to play, the sounds grew stronger. Each note carried pieces of his story, his love, his loss, his struggles. He wasn't just playing Chopin. He was playing his life. The piano became his voice, and for the first time in a long while he spoke through it. The guests, who moments ago were sipping wine and whispering, now stood motionless. Some looked uncomfortable, others deeply moved, unsure of why they suddenly felt emotional. The music filled the entire ballroom like a soft wind brushing through an open field. Miranda sat frozen, her hand still holding the glass of wine she'd forgotten to sip. Her mind drifted back to her own father, who used to play the same composer for her when she was a child. She had long buried those memories under layers of success and pride. But now, as the melody rose and fell, she felt tears sting her eyes. When Daniel finished, the final note lingered in the air for a moment, hanging like a whisper that refused to fade. Then silence. No one clapped, not yet. The room was too heavy with emotion to break the moment. Daniel looked down at the piano, his hands still trembling. He didn't care if he had won or lost. For the first time in years, he felt connected to his wife again. That was enough. Then slowly someone began to clap. It was soft at first, then grew louder. Soon the entire room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind they had given earlier, but genuine, heartfelt clapping that echoed through the ballroom. Miranda stood, still in shock, her mind trying to catch up with what her heart had just felt. She looked at Daniel, no longer as a man out of place, but as someone who had just reminded her what art really meant. Daniel quietly stood up and nodded respectfully before turning to leave the stage area. The applause followed him as he walked. Miranda's voice stopped him. "Wait," she said, her tone no longer playful. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Daniel paused and turned back. "From someone I loved," he said softly. "Someone who taught me that music isn't about impressing anyone, it's about feeling." Miranda couldn't find any words. For once, the woman who always had something clever to say was speechless. As Daniel stepped down from the platform, she watched him with a new kind of respect. A quiet realization that she had underestimated not just him, but the power of simplicity and sincerity. The guests continued to clap as he walked away, and for a moment it wasn't about wealth or class or reputation. It was about something pure that had touched every heart in the room. Daniel didn't smile or bow. He simply walked toward the exit, knowing he had done something far greater than winning a challenge. Behind him, Miranda looked at the piano with a thoughtful expression. For the first time in years, she realized money could buy everything but the kind of soul that played those notes. She raised her glass slightly, a quiet toast to a man who had reminded her what it meant to truly feel. The next morning, Daniel woke up early to the sound of his daughter's laughter echoing through their small apartment. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, filling the room with a soft golden glow. For a moment, the heaviness from the previous night faded, replaced by the simple joy of seeing his little girl smile. Lily was only 8, but her spirit was strong and bright. She was sitting on the floor with her sketchbook, drawing what looked like a grand piano surrounded by stars. He smiled as he walked over. "That's beautiful," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes full of excitement. "It's you, Daddy. You're playing the piano in a big fancy room and everyone's clapping." Daniel chuckled, though his chest tightened at the memory. "So you heard about that, huh?" he asked. Lily nodded proudly. "I saw a video online. Someone posted it. Everyone's talking about you." He froze for a moment. "Online?" he asked, trying to sound calm. She nodded again and pointed to the tablet on the table. Daniel sat down and opened it, his hands trembling slightly. Sure enough, the screen showed a video titled, "Single Father Moves Billionaire to Tears with Chopin Performance." It already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. People were writing things like, "That's real talent," and "This man played from his soul." Others were curious about his story. Some even said his music gave them hope. Daniel sat back, stunned. He hadn't realized anyone had been recording that night. He hadn't played for attention or praise. He had played because something in his heart needed to speak. Now the whole world seemed to be listening. Lily crawled onto his lap and hugged him. "I'm so proud of you, Daddy," she whispered. He kissed the top of her head, trying to hide the tears that filled his eyes. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart," he said softly. But as the morning went on, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He didn't want fame. He wanted peace. Yet something told him that what happened last night was only the beginning of something much bigger. By afternoon, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found a man in a suit standing there holding a folder. "Good afternoon, sir," the man said politely. "I'm here on behalf of Ms. Hawthorne." Daniel's heart skipped. "Miranda Hawthorne?" The man nodded. "She would like to meet you today if possible." Daniel hesitated. Part of him didn't want to go back into that world again. But he also knew refusing wasn't an option. Something in Miranda's eyes last night told him she had been deeply affected. Maybe this was her way of making peace, or maybe it was just another game. Either way, he needed to find out. A few hours later, Daniel found himself standing outside a tall glass building that looked more like a palace than an office. The receptionist smiled politely and guided him to the top floor, where Miranda's office overlooked the entire city. When he entered, she was standing by the window, staring out at the skyline with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Daniel," she said, turning around with a small smile. "I'm glad you came." Her voice was calm, softer than it had been at the gala. She gestured toward a seat. "Please, sit." He sat down slowly, unsure of what to expect. Miranda studied him for a moment before speaking again. "I owe you an apology," she said. Daniel looked surprised. "For what happened last night? I treated your pain like entertainment, and I'm not proud of that. But your music, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten." He didn't say anything at first. He just nodded. Miranda continued, "You see, my father was a musician. He loved Chopin. When I was young, he would play every evening after work. But when he passed away, I couldn't bear to listen anymore. Last night when you played, it felt like hearing him again. That's something money can't buy." Her voice trembled slightly, and for the first time Daniel saw the woman behind the wealth. The human being who carried her own share of memories and regrets. "I wasn't trying to prove anything," he said quietly. "I just played what I felt." Miranda smiled faintly. "And that's exactly why it mattered." She opened the folder on her desk and slid it toward him. Inside was a check, a very large one. "I meant what I said. Every penny. You moved me, and I want to help you and your daughter." Daniel stared at the check, speechless. It was enough to change their lives completely, to pay off debts, cover Lily's medical treatment, and give them a chance to start over. But something inside him hesitated. He slowly pushed the check back toward her. "I appreciate this more than you know," he said softly, "but I didn't play for money." Miranda looked surprised. "Then why did you come?" He smiled faintly. "To thank you For what you did for the orphanage. That's all. For a long moment, Miranda said nothing. Then she let out a slow breath. You're a rare man, Daniel, she said quietly. Most people would have taken it without thinking twice. He stood up. My daughter is my reason for everything I do. I just want her to grow up kind, not greedy. Miranda nodded slowly, her eyes softening. You remind me of my father, she said. He used to say the same thing. They talked for a while longer, about music, about life, about how sometimes pain teaches people more than success ever could. Before Daniel left, Miranda stopped him. There's something else, she said. Would you consider playing again? At one of my charity concerts? Not for money, just to inspire others the way you inspired me. Daniel hesitated. Performing again in front of strangers wasn't something he wanted to do. But then he thought of Lily, and how proud she had been that morning. Maybe this was a chance to show her what it meant to use one's gifts to bring hope. All right, he said finally. I'll do it, Miranda smiled. Thank you. And bring your daughter next time. I'd like to meet her. When he returned home that evening, Lily ran to him with a wide smile. Daddy, Daddy! Someone from the newspaper called. They want to interview you. He laughed softly. I don't think I'm interesting enough for that. But you are, she insisted. You made rich people cry. He couldn't help but laugh. They spent the rest of the evening cooking dinner together. Pasta with whatever they had left in the kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. As they ate, Daniel told her about Miranda's invitation to play again. Lily's eyes lit up. Can I come this time? She asked. Of course, he said. You're my lucky charm. The following week came quickly. The new charity event was held in a large concert hall instead of a ballroom. This time the crowd wasn't made up only of the rich. There were families, children, and even a few people from the orphanage where Lily went. The air felt different, warmer, more genuine. Backstage, Daniel felt nervous. He hadn't played in front of such a large audience before, and now there were reporters and photographers waiting to see him. But when he looked at Lily sitting in the front row, smiling proudly, the fear melted away. He took a deep breath and stepped out onto the stage. Miranda introduced him personally. Her words were filled with respect, not mockery. Last week, a man reminded me that real art comes from the heart, she said. Tonight, he's here to remind us all of the same. The audience applauded warmly as Daniel sat at the piano. He began to play, not Chopin this time, but a melody he had written himself, one that told his story through sound. It started softly like a whisper, then grew into something powerful and alive. Each note carried love, loss, and hope. People closed their eyes as the music filled the room, touching places in their hearts that words never could. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. Lily ran up to the stage, tears in her eyes, and hugged him tightly. Miranda stood at the side of the stage, clapping with a quiet smile. It was a moment of connection, one that erased all barriers between wealth and struggle. Later that night, as they walked home together, Lily looked up at her father. Mom would be so proud of you, she said softly. Daniel smiled down at her. She's the reason I still play. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt at peace. His music had not only changed his life, but had touched others in ways he never imagined. And somewhere, he believed, his wife was smiling too. The days after the concert passed like a dream. Daniel's performance had touched more people than he could ever imagine. Videos of him playing spread all over the internet, not because of fancy production or fame, but because of the emotion in his music. People from around the world left comments saying how his piano piece made them cry, how it reminded them of someone they loved, or how it gave them hope to start again. For Daniel, who had spent years just trying to survive, this sudden wave of kindness felt unreal. But even as people praised him, Daniel stayed humble. He still woke up early to make Lily breakfast, walked her to school, and worked part-time at a repair shop to make ends meet. The money Miranda had offered before still sat untouched in her office. He didn't want charity. He wanted to earn his peace. One morning, while he was fixing an old radio in the shop, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. When he answered, a cheerful voice said, "Mr. Daniel, this is Claire Thompson from the City Music Academy. We saw your video and would love to offer you a teaching position." He froze for a moment, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Teaching?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "We want you to share what you have. Your heart for music with our students. It's not just about technique. It's about emotion, and that's exactly what you have. Daniel smiled softly. I'll need to think about it, he said. But deep inside, something told him it was the right path. That evening, he told Lily about the offer while they were eating dinner. Her eyes sparkled. You should do it, Daddy. You'll be the best teacher ever. Her confidence in him melted away any doubt. He agreed to meet with the academy the next morning. When he arrived, the building was bright and filled with the sound of music echoing from practice rooms. The director, a kind woman with silver hair, welcomed him warmly. Your story has inspired our students, she said. They've been waiting to meet you. Daniel chuckled nervously. I'm no celebrity, he said. She smiled. That's exactly why they'll listen to you. He spent the first day walking through the classes, listening to the students play. Some were technically brilliant but lacked feeling, while others played with passion but struggled with control. He could see pieces of himself in all of them, the same hunger, the same love for music. When it was his turn to teach, the room fell silent. He told them about the night he played at the gala, how nervous he had been and how he never expected anyone to listen. Music isn't about perfection, he said softly. It's about honesty. When you play, don't think about how it sounds. Think about what it feels like. He sat at the piano and began to play a few notes from Chopin, just enough to show them how emotion changed everything. The students watched, mesmerized. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. After class, one of the students, a shy boy named Oliver, approached him. Sir, he said quietly, I've been playing for years, but I never felt like I was good enough. My parents keep comparing me to others. Daniel looked at him with kind eyes. Don't play to impress anyone, he said. Play to express yourself. The rest will come naturally. The boy smiled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in a long while. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a favorite at the academy. His classes were always full, and his gentle, patient way of teaching touched every student who met him. He encouraged them to find their own voice, not just repeat what they were told. Slowly, the academy began to change. Students stopped competing with each other and started playing with heart. Meanwhile, Miranda stayed in touch. She often called to ask how he was doing or sent small notes to check on Lily. One afternoon, she visited the academy unexpectedly. The students were thrilled to see her, but she wasn't there for publicity. She walked quietly into the room where Daniel was teaching and sat in the back, listening as he guided the students through a new piece. When the class ended, she approached him. You look happy, she said with a gentle smile. I am, he admitted. For the first time in a long time. She nodded, looking around the room filled with young musicians. You've created something special here. I can see it in their eyes. He smiled. They just needed someone to remind them why they started. Miranda hesitated for a moment before speaking again. I'm organizing another concert, she said, but this time I want it to be different, not about wealth or showmanship. I want it to be a fundraiser for children who can't afford music lessons. And I want you and your students to perform. Daniel looked surprised. That's a wonderful idea, he said. But are you sure people will come? Miranda smiled knowingly. They'll come because your story changed something in them. They'll come because they believe in what you represent. He agreed, and together they began to plan the event. Over the next few weeks, the students practiced every day. The excitement was contagious. Even Lily joined in, helping decorate the stage with paper stars and drawings of pianos. She told everyone proudly, My daddy's going to make people smile again. The night of the concert arrived quickly. The hall was filled not with the wealthy elite this time, but with families, teachers, and children. There were no designer gowns or diamond necklaces, just people who loved music. Daniel stood backstage with his students, reminding them to play with their hearts, not their heads. When it was his turn to perform, he walked onto the stage and looked out at the crowd. He saw Lily in the front row waving excitedly. He also saw Miranda sitting quietly, her eyes filled with pride. He began to play, but this time the piece wasn't Chopin. It was something new, something he had written with his students during their lessons. The melody was soft and full of life, weaving together the sound of hope and togetherness. As the notes flowed, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear had led to this moment. When the final note faded, the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some were crying, others smiling, but everyone felt something real. Miranda walked onto the stage and hugged Daniel tightly. You did it, she whispered. You reminded us all what music really means. He smiled humbly. It wasn't just me, he said. It was all of us. That night, they raised enough money to fund free music lessons for hundreds of children. The story of the single father who once played for a billionaire now became a story of hope and generosity. Later, after the concert ended, Daniel and Lily sat outside the hall watching the stars. She leaned against him, sleepy but happy. You think Mom saw you play tonight? She asked. Daniel looked up at the sky and smiled softly. I think she's been listening the whole time, he said. Lily yawned and rested her head on his shoulder. You're my hero, Daddy, she murmured before drifting off to sleep. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, feeling the cool night breeze against his face. Miranda stepped out a few minutes later, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to him and sat beside him quietly. She's lucky to have you, she said. I think I'm the lucky one, he replied. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint sound of a violin being played somewhere nearby. Miranda turned to him after a moment. You know, she said softly, your story reminded me that money isn't the real inheritance we leave behind. It's the way we make people feel. Daniel nodded. That's true, he said. And music has a way of keeping that feeling alive. As the night grew quiet, Miranda looked at the stars and smiled. Maybe someday, she said, we'll build something together, a school perhaps, a place where every child can learn music no matter where they come from. Daniel looked at her, thoughtful. I'd like that, he said. A place where music belongs to everyone. The idea lingered between them, simple yet powerful. A dream born not out of wealth or ambition, but out of shared humanity. That night, Daniel carried Lily home in his arms. As he walked through the quiet streets, he felt lighter than he had in years. The world suddenly seemed brighter, filled with endless possibilities. He knew there would still be challenges, but now he had something that couldn't be taken away. Hope, purpose, and the sound of music that connected every heart it touched. And in that soft melody that lived in his mind, he could still hear his wife's voice whispering, keep playing, the world needs to listen. The days that followed the concert were filled with unexpected opportunities for Daniel. People continued to reach out, not for fame, but because they felt inspired by his story and his music. Families emailed him, sharing how his performance had moved them or encouraged their children to pursue music. Schools invited him to speak, community centers asked him to conduct small workshops, and even local radio stations wanted to interview him about his experiences. It was overwhelming, yet deeply rewarding. One rainy afternoon, Daniel was walking home from the music academy with Lily under his umbrella when he spotted an elderly man struggling to carry a bag of groceries. Without hesitation, he ran over to help. The man smiled warmly. Thank you, young man. Not many people stop to help anymore. Daniel shrugged. It's nothing. My daughter and I try to do what we can. Lily waved shyly and the man chuckled. You two remind me of hope in this city, he said. That simple encounter made Daniel realize how much small acts of kindness mattered, just as much as the music he played. Back at home, Daniel and Lily began preparing for the next charity concert at the academy. They were decorating the stage, placing candles, drawing stars and musical notes on the walls, and hanging small lights. Lily worked with a focused determination, making sure everything was perfect. Daddy, she said, pausing to look at him, I want every child to feel like music is magic tonight. Daniel smiled, touched by her words. He knelt down and whispered, You already make magic every day, Lily. When the night of the concert arrived, the hall was filled to capacity. Unlike the gala, this crowd was diverse, with children, parents, teachers, and music lovers of all ages. There were no luxurious gowns, no sparkling jewels. Just people who came with open hearts, ready to experience something real. The atmosphere was buzzing with anticipation, yet calm and welcoming. Daniel stood backstage, listening to the hum of excitement. He felt a mixture of nervousness and calm. He glanced at his students, who were practicing their warm-up pieces quietly. Some of them looked anxious, but he could see the determination in their eyes. He knew that for many of them, this was the first time they had a chance to perform in front of a supportive crowd. He gave each of them a reassuring nod. Play from your heart. Nothing else matters, he whispered. When the performance began, Daniel walked onto the stage. The audience applauded warmly, their smiles genuine. He sat at the piano and began playing a soft, flowing melody he had composed with his students. The notes told a story of hope, struggle, and triumph. It was simple, yet every chord resonated with emotion. As he played, he watched his students follow along, their fingers gliding across the keys, and even the shyest ones seemed to find confidence. The audience was captivated. Children leaned forward in their seats. Parents wiped tears from their eyes, and teachers exchanged glances of admiration. The music wasn't about showing skill. It was about connecting with people, and it was working beautifully. Daniel felt the same warmth he had felt the night he first played for Miranda, but this time it was multiplied. The joy in the room was palpable. After Daniel finished his solo piece, the students performed a collaborative piece they had practiced for weeks. The melody was lively, full of energy, and it carried the laughter and innocence of childhood. The audience cheered, clapped, and even some sang along. It was a celebration not just of music, but of community, connection, and hope. When the concert ended, Miranda stepped onto the stage to speak. She didn't speak of wealth, fame, or status. Instead, she praised the students, the teachers, and the dedication it took to bring music to those who might not have access otherwise. "Tonight," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "we are reminded that music is not about what we own or what we show. It is about what we feel and how we share it." Daniel watched from the side of the stage as the crowd erupted in applause once again. He felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of money or recognition could ever provide. He knew that this moment, this connection with people through music, was far more valuable than anything else he had ever experienced. Backstage, Lily ran into his arms. "Daddy, they loved it. Did you see their faces?" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. He hugged her tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. And they loved you too," she giggled. "I helped too, remember?" Daniel laughed softly. "Yes, you made the magic happen." As they left the concert hall that night, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that music had become more than a way to honor his wife's memory. It had become a way to bring people together, to give hope, and to inspire change. He thought about all the students he had taught, the children who now had a chance to learn, and the parents who could see their children's talents nurtured. It was a ripple effect, and he felt proud to be a part of it. The next morning, Daniel returned to the academy, where the students were buzzing with excitement. They couldn't stop talking about the concert, how it had felt to perform in front of a supportive audience, and how much they had learned from each other. Daniel listened with a smile, proud of their growth. He reminded them gently that the most important lesson wasn't about playing perfectly. It was about feeling, sharing, and connecting. "Every note you play carries a part of who you are," he said. "Never forget that." During lunch, one of the students, a young girl named Mia, came to him with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Daniel, I want to play like you someday," she said softly. "Not for applause or prizes, but so people feel something when they listen." Daniel knelt beside her and took her hand. "You already play from your heart, Mia. Keep doing that and you'll touch more lives than you can imagine." Meanwhile, the news of the charity concert spread quickly. Local newspapers and online platforms featured stories about the event, highlighting how Daniel and his students had brought the community together through music. People shared videos and photos, and the positive feedback poured in. But Daniel remained grounded. He didn't seek recognition. He simply wanted to continue teaching, sharing, and inspiring. One afternoon, as Daniel was helping Lily with her homework, the phone rang. It was Miranda. "I wanted to check on you and your daughter," she said. "And also I have an idea for a new project. I want to open a small community music center, and I would like you to be part of it." Daniel's heart raced. The idea of a permanent space where children could learn and express themselves through music was a dream come true. "I'd be honored," he said. "This could change so many lives." Over the next few weeks, plans for the community music center began to take shape. Daniel worked closely with Miranda and other volunteers, helping design the curriculum, set up classrooms, and recruit teachers. Lily helped too, decorating the walls with drawings and inspirational quotes about music and kindness. It was a collective effort, fueled by a shared belief in the power of music. The opening day of the center was filled with excitement. Children from various backgrounds arrived, eager to learn and explore. The first class started with Daniel welcoming them, sharing stories about music, life, and the importance of expressing oneself. He encouraged them to find their own voice just as he had learned to do. As he walked around the room, helping students with their techniques and encouraging them to play with feeling, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than teaching. It was nurturing a generation of children who would carry music in their hearts, who would learn the lessons of empathy, patience, and perseverance through each note. Later that evening, as Daniel and Lily sat together in the quiet of their small apartment, they reflected on the journey they had been through. From the night at the gala to the concerts to the opening of the music center, it had been a whirlwind of challenges and triumphs. Daniel held Lily close and whispered, "Your mom would be so proud of everything we've done." Lily looked up at him with wide eyes. "We did it together, Daddy," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "Yes, we did, sweetheart, together." And as they watched the stars through the window, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. The music, the connections, the hope, they were all part of something bigger than himself. For the first time in years, he truly believed that life, even in its hardships, could be beautiful, meaningful, and full of love. The community music center quickly became a place of joy and learning. Children filled the rooms with laughter and the sound of piano keys, violins, and other instruments. Some came from families who could afford lessons, but many were children who had never had the chance to explore music before. Daniel walked through the hallways every day, helping, guiding, and encouraging each student with patience and kindness. Each smile, each note played correctly, was a small victory. One afternoon, as Daniel helped a young boy with a difficult piano piece, he noticed a girl sitting quietly in the corner, drawing music notes on a sheet of paper. She seemed hesitant to join the others, afraid that her skills were not good enough. Daniel knelt beside her and gently asked, "Would you like to play something for me?" The girl shook her head, her eyes downcast. "I'm not very good," she whispered. Daniel smiled warmly. "It's not about being good or perfect. It's about what you feel. Let me hear your heart." After a long pause, she timidly placed her fingers on the keys and began a soft, shaky melody. Daniel listened carefully, nodding and encouraging her. Slowly, her confidence grew and the notes became stronger, richer, more expressive. By the end of the piece, she was smiling brightly, and Daniel could see her pride shining in her eyes. "See," he said gently, "you just needed to believe in yourself." The music center became a place where children could explore not just music, but their emotions and dreams. Some students were shy, some struggled academically, and some had difficult home lives. Daniel made it a point to teach them that music could be a safe space, a way to express what they couldn't put into words. It was a lesson that reached far beyond the piano keys. One day, Daniel received an unexpected letter from a local music academy inviting him and some of his students to perform at a citywide music festival. The festival was prestigious, attended by well-known musicians, teachers, and music lovers. It was a huge opportunity, and Daniel was hesitant. He wanted his students to shine, but he worried about the pressure. "Are they ready for this?" he asked himself. He discussed it with his students and their parents, encouraging them to see it as a chance to learn and grow, not a competition. Everyone agreed, and soon rehearsals began. Daniel stayed late every day, helping the students perfect their pieces, adjusting arrangements, and building their confidence. He reminded them again and again, "Play with your heart. The rest will follow." The festival day arrived, and Daniel and his students traveled to the city's grand concert hall. The building was enormous, with a stage that looked like it belonged in a palace. Many of the students were nervous, their hands shaking slightly as they held their instruments. Daniel knelt in front of them, looking into their eyes. "Remember why you play," he said softly. "Not for applause, not for anyone else. Play for yourselves, and everything else will follow." When it was their turn, the students walked on stage with Daniel leading the way. The audience was filled with parents, musicians, and music lovers from across the city. There was a hushed silence as Daniel took his seat at the piano, followed by the students at their instruments. Then, with a gentle nod, he began to play. The music started softly, a melody that Daniel had written with his students. Each note carried the feelings of months of practice, patience, and learning. The students joined in, adding layers of sound that grew richer and more expressive with each passing moment. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, listening intently as the music wove a story of hope, perseverance, and joy. By the end of the performance, the crowd rose to its feet, clapping and cheering. Some were crying, others were smiling, but everyone was deeply moved. Daniel's students glowed with pride, realizing that they had not only played music but had touched the hearts of everyone in the room. Even Daniel felt a lump in his throat. This was what he had dreamed of. Not fame, not recognition, but the knowledge that music could make a difference. Backstage, Miranda was waiting for them, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she said softly. "Every one of you. You reminded us all what music really is." Daniel smiled. "They did it themselves. I only guided them." The festival led to more opportunities. Other schools and community centers invited Daniel to give workshops. Musicians reached out to collaborate with him. Yet, despite all this, he remained grounded, focused on the center and the students who needed him most. Lily, too, became involved, helping younger children, learning to teach small lessons of encouragement alongside her father. One rainy evening, after a long day of teaching, Daniel and Lily were walking home when they saw a small group of children huddled under a tree, trying to stay dry. They were carrying a broken violin and a tattered sheet of music. Daniel approached them gently. "What happened here?" he asked. One of the boys looked up with tearful eyes. "We wanted to play, but our instruments are broken. We can't afford new ones." Daniel's heart ached. He glanced at Lily, who had a determined look on her face. "We can help," she said softly. "We'll fix them and teach them." Daniel smiled, realizing that this was exactly why they had created the music center, to reach children like these. They gathered the children, helped repair the instruments, and invited them to the center for lessons. Soon the small group became part of the larger family, their love for music growing stronger every day. Months passed, and the music center thrived. Daniel's students were growing not only in skill but in confidence and character. Parents often shared stories of how their children had changed, becoming more expressive, disciplined, and kind. Daniel's teaching philosophy, playing with the heart, not for applause, had created a ripple effect that extended beyond the center's walls. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from a young woman who had attended the first concert he ever played at the gala. She wanted to bring her own students to learn from him. Daniel agreed and welcomed her and her students warmly, eager to share his knowledge and continue building a community united by music. Meanwhile, Miranda continued to support the center, not just financially but by volunteering and encouraging the children. She often joined classes, listening quietly and offering her insights. Her relationship with Daniel had grown into a strong friendship, built on respect, shared purpose, and the love of music. They often stayed late at the center, discussing ways to expand programs and reach even more children. One evening after a long day of teaching, Daniel and Lily sat together on the center's steps watching the sun set. "Daddy," Lily said softly, "I think music is magic. It makes people feel things they can't say." Daniel smiled and hugged her close. "It is magic, sweetheart. And now we get to share it with the world." As the years went by, the center continued to grow. Students who had once been shy or struggling became confident performers. Some went on to study music professionally, while others simply carried the lessons into their everyday lives, spreading kindness and inspiration. Daniel's dream of using music to touch lives had become a reality far beyond what he had imagined. Through it all, Daniel remained humble. He remembered the first night at the gala, when he had played for Miranda Hawthorne and felt invisible in a room full of wealth and privilege. He remembered the nervousness, the fear, and the sense of connection that had come through the music. It had been the start of a journey that changed his life, his daughter's life, and the lives of countless others. He realized that music was more than just notes on a page. It was a bridge between hearts, a language that could convey love, hope, and resilience. And as he watched the children in the music center practicing, laughing, and learning, he knew that the true power of music was not in fame or fortune, but in its ability to touch people deeply and create a better world. One evening, after everyone had left the center, Daniel sat at the piano alone. He played softly, recalling the melodies he had composed with his students, the pieces of Chopin that had inspired him, and the music of his late wife that had stayed with him all these years. Each note was a tribute to the journey he had taken, to the love and hope that had carried him forward. Lily walked in quietly and sat beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Daddy, will you teach me how to write my own song?" she asked. Daniel smiled and kissed her forehead. "Of course, sweetheart. Together we'll make music that the world can feel." And as the night settled in around them, The piano echoed softly through the empty hall, carrying with it the stories of hope, love, and dreams that had begun with a single man who played from his heart. The music room was filled with the soft sound of a piano that morning. The sunlight touched the old wooden floor and made the air feel warm. Daniel sat at the piano, his hands moving gently over the keys. Every note he played seemed to hold a piece of his heart. Around him, children laughed and talked, carrying small instruments, some holding violins, others with recorders or guitars. The foundation Mrs. Hamilton had helped him start was alive now, full of life and hope. It had been months since that day at her mansion, the day he played Chopin's Nocturne and left her speechless. She had offered him her fortune, but Daniel had refused it politely. What he wanted more than anything was not money. It was a second chance. A chance to rebuild the dream he once had before life had broken it apart. Mrs. Hamilton had understood. Instead of giving him her inheritance, she gave him something much greater, an opportunity. Together they opened a small music center in the old community hall, where Daniel once practiced alone at night. That same hall now echoed with laughter, music, and the sound of hope. Lily was always the first one to arrive. She would rush to the piano, her tiny fingers trying to copy her father's movements. "Play it again, Papa," she would say with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Every time she said it, Daniel's chest filled with a warmth he couldn't describe. She had become his reason, his rhythm, his whole melody. Mrs. Hamilton often visited the center. The first time she came after it opened, she stood silently at the door, watching the children play. There was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She had once been a woman surrounded by wealth but starved of joy. Now she found herself laughing with children, listening to stories, and sometimes even sitting at the piano bench beside Daniel. It was as if music had brought her back to life too. One afternoon she arrived earlier than usual, carrying a small box. Daniel greeted her with his usual warmth. "You're early today," he said. She smiled. "I couldn't stay away. I brought you something." She opened the box to reveal a small silver music locket. Inside it was a tiny engraving, a piano, and a short quote, "For the man who reminded me what real music sounds like." Daniel didn't know what to say. He looked at her, his eyes soft with gratitude. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted gently. "You changed my life, Daniel. I thought I had everything until I realized I had forgotten what love, passion, and purpose felt like. Watching you with these children reminds me that real wealth isn't stored in banks. It's in the hearts we touch." He smiled, his fingers brushing the little locket. "Then I guess we're both rich in the right way." That afternoon she stayed to watch him teach. He guided the children through simple melodies, his voice calm and patient. When a small boy struggled to play a few notes, Daniel knelt beside him and said, "Don't worry about the mistakes. Every wrong note brings you closer to the right one." The boy smiled shyly and tried again. This time the melody came out smoother. The entire room clapped, and the boy's face lit up with pride. Mrs. Hamilton leaned back in her chair, her eyes glistening. It wasn't just a music lesson, it was a life lesson. These children, many of whom came from difficult backgrounds, were learning something far more valuable than music. They were learning belief, patience, and hope. As evening approached, Daniel sat at the piano again. The children gathered around, waiting for him to play something to end the day. He looked at Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and smiled. "What should we play today?" She thought for a moment and whispered, "The one that made her cry." Everyone chuckled softly, and Mrs. Hamilton smiled through her tears. "Yes, the one that made me cry," she said. Daniel began to play Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor. The notes rose softly, filling the room with something magical. The melody floated in the air like a whisper from another time. Every child listened in silence. Even the ones who usually couldn't sit still sat quietly, as if the piano had cast a spell over them. Mrs. Hamilton closed her eyes. For a moment she was back with her late husband, remembering how he used to play the same piece on rainy nights. She could almost feel his presence beside her again. But this time the memory didn't hurt. It felt peaceful, healing. The music had turned her grief into something beautiful. When Daniel finished, the room stayed silent for a few seconds. Then the children began to clap, slowly at first, then louder. Lily ran to her father, wrapping her little arms around him. "That was perfect, Papa," she said softly. He smiled and kissed her forehead. It's only perfect because you're here." Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Mrs. Hamilton stayed behind. The hall was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. She and Daniel sat together near the piano. "You know," she began, "the night I made that foolish joke about my inheritance, I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. I was angry, lonely, and maybe even trying to prove that no one cared about real music anymore. But then you came along and proved me wrong." Daniel smiled faintly. "I think sometimes life brings the right people at the right time. I needed to remember who I was. You needed to remember what music could still mean. Maybe we both got what we didn't know we were searching for." She nodded slowly. "You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever find again, peace. And as for your daughter," she said, looking toward the small drawing Lily had made on the wall, "she has a gift. Don't ever let her forget that." "I won't," Daniel said quietly. "She's my reason to keep playing." A few weeks later, the foundation hosted its first public concert. The hall was decorated with flowers, the seats filled with parents, neighbors, and strangers who had heard about the single dad who played Chopin for a billionaire. Reporters came, but Daniel wasn't interested in fame. He just wanted to show what music could do. The children performed beautifully, simple songs full of heart. When it was time for the final piece, Daniel walked to the piano. He looked around the hall and saw Mrs. Hamilton sitting in the front row, smiling proudly. Lily stood beside him on the stage, holding his hand. He whispered, "This one's for you and for everyone who ever believed again." He started playing the same Chopin piece once more, but this time, it sounded different. Softer, freer, filled with joy rather than sorrow. Lily joined in, playing a few high notes beside him. The combination of their sounds was something pure and unforgettable. The crowd rose to their feet as the last note lingered in the air. Mrs. Hamilton wiped away tears, clapping harder than anyone. She wasn't crying from sadness anymore, but from gratitude. That performance wasn't just music. It was the story of second chances, of healing, of life finding its melody again. After the concert, people came to congratulate Daniel. He thanked them kindly but stayed humble. When everyone left, Mrs. Hamilton approached him quietly. "I have something for Lily," she said, handing him an envelope. Inside was a letter stating that she had set up a trust for Lily's education. "It's not charity," she said softly. "It's my thank you to Chopin's messenger." Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. "You've done too much already." She shook her head gently. "No, Daniel, you did. You brought meaning back to my life. This is just my way of keeping the music alive." As years went by, the music center grew. More children joined. More teachers came to help. And Daniel's small dream became something bigger than he ever imagined. Mrs. Hamilton continued to support it quietly, never seeking attention or praise. She became like a grandmother to Lily, visiting often, bringing sheet music or cookies she had baked herself. One day when Daniel was cleaning up after class, Lily, now a few years older, asked him, "Papa, do you think I'll ever play like you?" He smiled, putting his hand on her shoulder. "No," he said softly. "You'll play better, because you'll play with your own heart." She giggled and began to play a few notes on the piano, creating her own small tune. Daniel stood there watching her, realizing how far they had come, from nights filled with struggle to mornings filled with hope. Life had changed in ways he could never have imagined, all because of a moment, a song, and a woman who had once made a careless promise that turned into something beautiful. That night, after locking the center, he sat alone for a while. The city lights shimmered outside and the piano waited quietly in the corner. He ran his fingers across the keys, playing Chopin once more. The music floated softly through the empty hall, but this time there was no sadness in it, only peace, only love. When the last note faded, he closed his eyes, smiled, and whispered, "Every penny of it was worth it." Outside, the stars shimmered faintly, as if listening. Somewhere in that silence, it felt as though the world itself was applauding. Not for money, not for fame, but for the pure, simple beauty of a man, a child, and a melody that had changed more than just one life.